Welcome, everybody. We're glad you're here. This is episode 4 of our series Champion Chats, and the title this week is going to be the topic is Let's Normalize Therapy in Our Kids. And we've got a lot of exciting conversation coming up. But first, we want to know where you guys are watching from. So while you're watching this, go ahead and tell us in the comments what state you're watching from. And we know there's a heat wave going on. So, how hot was it today where you're at? What was the temperature today? I know in Texas it's like in the hundreds all week long. But what else is hot today? This conversation we're about to get into. So, July is the summer. It's like the middle of the summer, right? The kids are having a great time. They might be at camp, they might be at home, eating your food, getting on your nerves. They're somewhere. School is not in. So, while for a lot of people it's a time for relaxation, vacations, having a great time, there are some people who get anxious in the summertime and not for a good reason. It's because some of those resources that are available during the school year aren't there in the summertime necessarily for them to count on. So we've talked about, and I'm sure you've all heard about in your cities, uh, free food that kids get during the school year, and there are programs to extend those resources to children in the summertime, to help close that gap. But what about counseling? What about school counselors? What about kids who go to see the counselor while they're at school and then summertime hits and they don't have anyone to talk to anymore? So that's a real issue. So if you all remember your school counselor's name, any grade, drop it in the comments. If you were fortunate enough to have a school counselor, let us know. We know school counselors can have a great positive impact on students' lives, even before they even realize it. They end up growing up and remembering who that counselor was and the impact they had. So we have a special guest, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we bring her on the stream. So our special guest today, her name is Shadon Stewart, and she is currently an intervention specialist in Cincinnati Public School District. And she was a finalist in the Dr. Lawrence C. Hawkins Educator of the Year Award in 2020. She served in many leadership roles, such as the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers, building representative, a member of the Intervention Specialist Curriculum Council Steering Committee, the 504 coordinator, and worked as the BTC, which is the Building Test Coordinator. She's also facilitated professional development for the district, as well as presented and served on a panel for National Feldenkrais Summit in 2020. And she's also an adjunct professor at Xavier University here in Cincinnati in the College of Education, Special Education Department. And she has a master's degree in educational leadership, a master's degree in special education, and a BA in liberal arts with a minor in gender and diversity studies. So she has done a lot and she's got a lot that she could share with us. So let's all welcome Miss Shadon.
Hi,
Hi. So
hi,
glad to have
excited to
you
be
here.
here.
Yes, yes. So, we just read all those things about you, but we just want to find out, kind of like how your journey brought you to, your profession. So, can you tell us just a little bit about, like how you grew up? Like what was your nuclear family like inside your house? What was the makeup like?
So, it was myself, my mother, my brother, and my stepfather for many years. I was a student in Cincinnati Public Schools up until sixth grade. Then my family moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I stayed until after I had my children in my early to mid 20s. So I did elementary school in Cincinnati, and then junior high school in Atlanta or Clarkston, Georgia, which is outside of Atlanta.
What elementary school in Cincinnati?
I went to Midway. I lived on the east side. I was bused in the
Ooh,
70s. I know, telling my age here. I was bused in the 70s to the west side, and Midway was a bilingual school. So French was the second language I was
okay. French. I did take French in high school. Very little French.
learning.
And I did not last long, so I don't know too much. Um, so when you were in school, like what type of student would you consider yourself to be? Were you introverted, extroverted, quick learner, took a longer time?
So I was a pretty quick learner. I was probably considered a nerd, which I was okay with that.
Mhm.
I was very brainy. I participated in more of the academic clubs or the political type clubs. I was actually senior class vice president.
Wow.
Um, but academics was my thing. I'm not quite extroverted, but I did know a lot of people. Let's just put it like so. Um,
Okay. So you're a little well rounded, but you took your education seriously.
I did.
All right. So you go from high school, and then something makes you want to go down this career path. So what made you decide to go down this path?
So I want to say I was a late bloomer. I came to education later in my life. I was actually a biology pre-med major my first 2 years of college, right out of high school. Then, for financial reasons, I stopped going to college. I ended up having my family, and I ended up going back. I chose special education because I used to volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club in my neighborhood. And they asked me to teach a program one year. And I realized that there were so many students that were really struggling with just the basic foundational skills.
Mhm.
And so I talked to a good friend of mine about that, and she was an intervention specialist. She invited me to come to her room because she was like, Shadon, I think this is for you. This is what you need to be doing. You can really make a difference. And I went and observed, and I think I just felt like that was the path I wanted to try. And so took that path, and I've been in special education for the last 12 years.
Wow. It's definitely a calling, I think. I mean, it's not a job. You know,
No.
you have to love what you're doing because you have to deal with so many personality types,
Mhm.
behaviors with the children and with the adults. Um,
Definitely.
so it's very commendable that you have stuck with this. And I found that like a lot of teachers that I've encountered, my children's teachers, you can tell like they are in this. Um, so and then we had 2019, 2020 happen, and COVID just ransacked education, it turned it upside down, changed how it looked. How specifically did it impact where you're placed at right now?
So COVID hit us because number one, we were not prepared. No school district was prepared for having to teach every academic subject online.
Right.
Um, we scrambled to get the technology in the hands of the students, along with just having access to the Wi-Fi. And you have teachers who don't necessarily use the technology. So that was also a huge learning curve for the teachers. You have students that are home. You have parents that are home and parents that are not home. So some students have a little more support where others don't. And that's just even with logging into the classes. Um, it changed just the way that we look at education, I believe. Because when you think about online school, a lot of times, of course, we know colleges offer those courses. And they do have some schools that are not face to face that are online, but typically those are students that might have issues in the regular building, or there are reasons that they need to be home uh, online. But COVID just threw a monkey wrench in education, like we've known it for years, for hundreds of years,
Right.
um, and it changed the children because they weren't around their friends. They lost those social skills as well
Right.
as their academic skills. That was a huge struggle.
Right. So so when you interact with children in the building, what types, if child were to come see you, would you all do interactive activities? Would you all like do things other than just sit and talk? Would you do interactive things?
Yes. So a lot of times, when I'm working with children, we do a lot of interactive things. We use a lot of manipulatives. We do a lot of things in the class, just traditional. It's more like traditional school, hands-on work, not necessarily using the technology. We use it sometimes, but our kids just really, really need that break from technology. So sometimes we have to have those conversations, especially when we're addressing behaviors that are taking place. When we're addressing students that are having anxiety or just having issues with others, peer to peer conflict with other teachers. So when uh, when we're working, we're not necessarily using the technology, uh, but we are. It's more of a social setting because we're working together with other students.
Yeah. And everyone who's watching, if you have a question for Shadon, just drop it in the comments and we'll see it and we'll get to that. So when you're used to having interactive um, contacts with the children in the building, and then COVID happens and everything is online, and you can't necessarily be interactive unless you all found some way to do it online. What how did your approach have to change, and did you all consult with each other, like the professionals, the staff? Did you all say, hey, you got any ideas? How are we going to do this?
So I think one of the positives from COVID is it made us as a team really have to come together and work together and find ways to reach the children. Like you said, we had to have those conversations. Okay, if such and such isn't coming to your class, how do you get them to show up? Or how are you getting and keeping your students engaged? It was a lot of reaching out to the parents. When I tell you, so many parents have my cell phone number because I'm like, okay, I'm texting, I'm calling, I'm saying, hey, such and such is not online, or what's going on, or make sure I'm sending reminders, make sure that we're online working at 2 p.m. or just however. It was a lot of communication. I think the kids really missed that working with the materials, and don't get me wrong, teachers were very, very creative. Um, it might be a matter of, okay, this is a list of items that you need from your house, and we're going to do this experiment together online. I know we would do Fun Friday. So we would do like a scavenger hunt. So you have to run, get these items and bring them back. And that's how you score your points. So we tried to find ways to make it interactive. I know that there were teachers who would have like lunch bunches. So during their lunchtime, the students are eating lunch at home and it's like social hour. They might be watching a show or just, playing certain games or just having conversations. So I think teachers were very creative or attempted to be very creative, but it's really hard to battle the video games that the kids. That was a
Right,
big issue, the video games.
right. And like you said, some of the parents, availability differs. Some parents work from home and they were good with technology and they could help their kids get online. Some kids were at their grandma's house and
Hmm.
grandma might not know how to do it.
Right.
So, lots of different variables. Um, do you think the children, after they got out of that COVID era and got back into school, do you think there was a transition period? Do you think they ever got back to how they were before COVID?
To be honest with you, I feel like this entire school year was a transition period. Students, we went from 2 years where they had 2 years of partially in school partially online, and then we came back this past year, and it was totally
Hmm.
face to face. Students had to relearn social skills, um, just simple things like following directions. You don't think about the fact that students have to be taught how to line up and how to walk in the line and how to walk in the hallway. We had to reteach a lot of these skills that they had not fully utilized in 2 years. Um, Interacting with it was a struggle sometimes, just the interactions with the children, because I think they have become so used to doing things when they want and on their time, because here you have this online work and it's not due tomorrow, so you can do it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock, as opposed to having to actually sit still in a seat for however many minutes while the teacher's teaching. You're taking notes and you're doing your work. It was a huge transition period.
Right. And I think the appreciation of parents and caregivers to teacher went up exponentially, 1,000%, as we said at home.
Yeah.
I know I personally, I'm working, I work from home. I'm on conference calls. I'm trying to help them. I'm trying to focus on work. And it was just a lot. And we couldn't wait until school opened back up. And yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
And that's one of the things we tried to take into consideration as the educators. We know that it was a challenge for parents, because um, we didn't expect the parents to be the teachers. So but at the same time, we needed the support of the parents, because we needed parents to say, hey, get in line, get online, sit in your seat, pay
Right.
attention, because those are all the things that we typically do during the school day. But at the same time, we also understood that, there are parents that are working parents that can't be there. So your child might be at the daycare center, and the daycare center has how many students. So they can't necessarily focus on this one child. So
Right.
we tried to take all that into consideration, and I think it was a really difficult time for the children, for families, for teachers, just for everyone overall.
Yeah. So, did you find that your work hours, like your preparation hours, increased? Like trying to, develop different ideas or different plans?
I feel like it increased, but at the same time, um, I worked with smaller groups as well, so I could get online with two students at a time and really, utilize that time, because we didn't have a lot of transitions like you have in a school day. So your 30 minutes are literally your 30 minutes. We don't have to stop early to go to the next class, get your things together, whatnot. When you're done, you log off, the next students log in. Um, I felt like my time was utilized really well. I felt like the children got a lot out of our time together. And then I would also, we also had just office hours where kids could log in just to get help with homework, with classwork. And I feel like they use that a lot. We in our building we have paraprofessionals who were able to also log in and work with small groups of kids, or support children like that. If they needed supplies, we drop it off for them. You know, so that might be where the time looks a little different. Just because I had smaller groups, so I had more groups, so I had to plan more activities versus,
Yeah.
where I might have four students here, I might have worked with one or two at a time.
Okay. So, did you have to do anything to kind of decompress, like on your time away from school and the grind of the kids throughout the week? Just because the kids, probably they may have been exhibiting more behaviors or more anxiety, or just because they were out of their normal routine. So, to take yourself kind of into a good mental space yourself, did you have to be conscious to take care of yourself in some sort of way during all this?
Yes. Self-care, you hear about it, you talk about it, but I think it was really emphasized a lot more during COVID. Even the district would send out things like weekly about ways, to take care of yourself. Um, I think it was very stressful because, we worry about our children. And if
Right.
you don't see a student online for so many days and you can't get in touch with someone, you worry about that. You worry about whether or not they have what they need. And then, the social aspect of it. Kids weren't able to go outside and play with their friends. That's huge for
Mhm.
elementary age kids. So I think that there was a lot of stress and a lot of worry, but we would get we were offered professional developments on that. We were offered just words of wisdom and things like that. It was I did have to. I felt like that was probably the one when I really started having to just make it about me during the day sometimes, like after work.
Right.
Well, shut down, and I don't need to talk to anybody for at least 30 minutes,
Hmm.
45 minutes.
Take a break.
Yes.
So Adelia says she thanks God for you. She's in
Oh,
the comments. We know Adelia's a big fan.
she is, you know what? She's an amazing mom. So she's one of the parents that makes it way easier for teachers. I just have to tell you that she makes it so easy for teachers.
We agree. Adelia's a great mom. You guys keep, if you have comments or questions, just go ahead and leave them in the chat.
And thank
All
you,
right.
Adelia.
So, yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. So we talked about COVID. So something that is not necessarily new, it's been happening the last couple of decades, but school shootings. So, um, we're in a place now where there are, what do they call them? What do they call the drills? Active shooter drills?
Alice drills or active shooter drills.
Active shooter drills that the children have to, be prepared, just like we did tornado drills and fire drills, active shooter drills now, to know what to do if someone tries to come in the school building and hurt them and harm them. Do you find that the children are exhibiting that they're affected by the whole situation, like having to do the drills, seeing the news coverage of this happening other places, wondering if it's going to happen to their school? What are you noticing there?
So I believe the drills affect some students way more than others. We've had students that are very anxious and very concerned, and so when we have those drills, we try to prep them for the drills to let them know that it's coming and that it's only a drill and this is why we're doing it. We try to make sure that they are in an environment with an adult that they trust. So if it's with me, they might be in my room. That way I can be there and offer those words of support. I think um, we've had some conversations. The students don't talk that much about, they didn't talk that much about this most recent school shooting, should I say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and, but sometimes I don't know if they are as anxious about the school shootings as they are about other things that are taking place in the community. As teachers, we're always concerned. They've tried to put a lot of things in place to keep us safe, to keep the schools safe. But we've had incidents where, like, parents have just walked in the building as opposed to using the correct protocol. Um, I've seen kids. Uh, Let me think. Like I said, with the Alice drill, I have seen kids who've been just very anxious, very upset,
Mm-hmm.
and we just try to make sure that they're in the safest environment. Um, we have the conversations. We have the conversations before the drills. We have the conversations after the drills. We let the parents know that the drills have taken place. But we didn't
Yeah,
have much
so
conversation.
they Adelia actually brought up the question I was going to ask in the comment. What can parents do to support their children if they have like anxiety or fear about things like that happening, either in school, outside of school? Like, what's some advice for parents and caregivers?
So one of the things that I really try to do is just stress to the students the importance of safety. Like the procedures that we put in place are for their safety, and we work really hard to keep them safe. Um, we talk about safety just if you're walking down the street. It's the same safety conversation that you want to have, that you always have with your children. You know, instead of saying, cross at the crosswalk and don't talk to strangers, you're just saying, okay, you need to follow the rules at school because those rules are put in place to keep you safe. So if you're having a drill, you have to be quiet and listen to the teacher, um, because everything is put in place to make sure that, you are able to come home every day. Everything we do is for safety. When they're telling you stop talking, we're in a line, you're letting teachers know where you are. All of those things are put in place to keep you safe. So I think it's just a matter of having those conversations about why we have rules in the buildings, and it's everything is. It always boils down to safety, and I stress that to a lot of students, even when they have the behaviors and they walk out of the class. One of the things I'm always telling them is, when you walk out of the class, the teacher doesn't know where you are, and that's unsafe for you. We are here to keep you safe. And so as long as the students know that the staff and we are all there working hard to keep children safe every day.
That's good advice. So, you know, oh, we have another question. What are some signs or indicators that your child should seek therapy?
So, that's such a broad question. And I say that because you have to know your child. Like if your child suddenly stops talking and they are a chatterbox, there are some issues. If your child is showing anxiety that they've never shown before, if they're showing fears, if they're not eating and they're not sleeping, these are all of the things that we talk about when we're meeting and discussing children that we feel may need to be referred to one of our mental health partners. These are things that we're looking at in school. Okay, your child is exhibiting behaviors like extreme anger. They're they go from 0 to 1,000 in seconds, and they're throwing things around. Okay, that's something we need to address. Um, your child is not interacting with any other children in the school setting. That's something we need to address. We've had children that have had loss. It could be a parent, it could be a sibling. We've actually, unfortunately, um, had, we've lost children in the building. So they bring in the therapist to talk with to speak with the children and the teachers and whatnot. And those are all reasons to look um, to look at therapy or look at children speaking with someone. We have our school resource coordinator is amazing. So we have great mental health partners in our building. They work with children in the building. They work with children outside of the building. They work with children all throughout the school year. But if you know your child, so when you see things that are not typical, that's when you want to start having the conversations.
Okay, that makes sense. When so as far as like communicating to your children, like you said during the active shooter drills, you all communicate with them beforehand. You tell
Yeah.
them like what's happening, what's going to happen, that it's just a drill. Other life circumstances that children might be facing, like maybe in the home life or something like that. If a parent knows that there's a big life event about to occur, um, do you suggest like free communication, not I mean, to some extent, of course, you don't want to tell them every single thing that's going on, but not letting them just kind of be blindsided by news, but kind of just sit down and say, there's something that's going on, or your grandmother is sick and she may not make it, instead of just waiting until she dies and saying, "Oh, grandma's dead," and they don't have time to process, like get ready for news. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I do think it's important to hold those lines of communication open with your children. Children are resilient. You'd be surprised at what they can handle. It does. I think it helps if they are prepared. That okay, grandma's sick. We don't know what's going to happen with grandma, but we need to make the most of this. We need to make sure we're talking to grandma, loving on grandma. That's something that needs to be communicated. Um, a lot of times, one of the things I try to do is I really try to build relationships with the families. That way, if something big like that is happening at home and the parents are comfortable enough to tell me, then I can keep an eye on the child in the school. And I have I know to be just looking out for things. So if this child suddenly blows up, well, I know why this child is blowing up because it's got a
Right.
lot going on. So those lines of communication, if the parent feels that they have that trust with the teacher, I think that helps too because there's been times when I've had to support kids in the school, like, hey, just come in my room, just come in my room, just have a seat, just let's cry about it, let's talk about it. And it helps get them through the day as well because they know that they have that support, not just at home, but, in a setting where they are just as much as they're at home as well. But I do
Yeah.
think that you have to be honest with your kids now. You don't have to give them all the details. But if we're waiting until the end, then they're blindsided. And it's harder for them I think it's harder for them to kind of handle when everything is just given to them at once as opposed to leading up to the event.
Yeah. Because just like we as adults need time to process, children need
Hmm.
the same amount of time to process, if not more. So I do agree that it's helpful when parents are feel comfortable enough to talk to the counselor at the school and to give them a heads up, like, hey,
Hmm.
this is what's going on. So if you notice them behaving in a different way, please let me know. Or tell your teacher, tell your child's teacher, because they can refer them to the counselor if they see certain behaviors.
Definitely.
We have another question from Carol. How do you help a child who needs specialized attention with learning before COVID, now that school has convened and they have no desire to learn? In high school, not as much parent involvement.
Oh, Miss Tober, we are struggling with that. I'm sorry. We are really struggling with that, even at the elementary school level. The one thing about high schoolers, though, they have the ability to reason a little more. And some of my high school friends, it's just a matter of building those relationships and having those conversations and almost hounding kids sometimes, just to show them that you are on their team. A lot of times, I feel like some of our kids don't know who's really on their team. So I think if they know that, Miss Tober's got my back, she's here to support me. Um, Sometimes that works. Motivation has just it's been a struggle. Like I was saying earlier, this year of transition, motivation has been a struggle for all of us, even at the elementary level. I've hounded, I've called parents, um, but one of the things that I always do is I just keep hounding and keep hounding and keep hounding. I don't let up so that they know, okay, well, somebody is definitely got my back. But at some point, they have to make the decision that that's what they want to do. I
Yeah,
don't know
that's
if
a
that was
tough
helpful or
situation.
not, but
No, I think that
it's
was great. Thank you for your comment, Aaliyah. She said some students will come to the teacher first with concerns and questions. And that's true if the child is more comfortable with the teacher because they may not see the counselor very often. I'm sure at the beginning of a school year or periodically during the year, the classrooms are introduced to the counselor and the other, people in the building who could help them with things. But that day to day is going to be that teacher in most circumstances.
Well, I'll tell you this: all schools don't have like a full-time school counselor, school psychologist. That's what we have in the elementary schools. So they're not there full time. So a lot of times that relationship is between the teacher and the student, or the student and a para, or the student and the administration. So our school psych who fills in as the counselor in our building, by the time a student gets to them, that's typically because the teachers have seen some issues and some problems, and they've reached out to the school site for
Yeah.
support.
So we've got another comment. Services are offered throughout the school year. Are there continued services during the summer break so the students can maintain success? So we talked about this a little bit offline before we started, but my children in particular at their school, they actually have counselors, but then they also have, I think they're called resource officers through the YMCA, I believe.
Resource coordinators,
Yes, resource
SRC.
coordinator. And that resource coordinator has connected with my child and does continue to connect with her during the summer months as well. So he reaches out and schedules Zooms with her once a week. But I know that's not necessarily commonplace, you know, throughout every district. So what do you think um, for the most part is going on in, well, you may not be able to speak to CPS as a whole, Cincinnati Public, but your school.
Well, I can say this generally. Our schools do have school resource coordinators, and we do have mental health partners who are not necessary who work with the students in the schools. And if your child connects with those mental health partners, a lot of times they provide the services during the school year and throughout the summer, based on what the child needs. So there are services that are available. It's just a matter of connecting with that resource coordinator, connecting with those mental health partners, and going moving forth from there. So,
Yeah, and okay, Adelia said that her son works with the children's home during the
mhm,
summertime. So I know that that's a good organization here in Cincinnati
mhm.
that does help kids year round. And they do come to the school campus sometimes as well and see the children there, as well as the kids going off site to the children's home.
I have children's home. I know Beach Acres is one. St. Joe's, St. Al's. These are just some of the ones that I'm aware of that we have through Cincinnati Public. But I think Children's Home is now Bright Spot, I believe. I think they've changed their name,
Right?
but
Yeah, they might have bright
but,
something.
but yes, they are. They have counselors who work with the students all year round.
But unfortunately, there's a waiting list, like there is for
Yes.
a lot of things. So you might be seeking, someone for your child to speak with, and they might say there's a 5 month waiting list. You know,
Hmm.
what can we do? Oh, it's
That's
called
point.
Best Point. That's what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. What should those parents do? If there's a waiting list and they know their child needs some sort of, you know, resource to talk to.
So that's when our resource coordinator comes into play, because the 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 names that I listed, those are the mental health partners that are actually in the schools. So sometimes our resource coordinators know of other partners that are that or they can just give you different types of resources to reach out to. Um, Best Point is in our building, but I have reached out to our coordinator for children before, and she's been able to get with the parents and give them other options to look into.
Okay.
Um, who's about this? There is a waiting list, unfortunately, um, but that's probably your best bet. Also, you can also talk to your pediatrician. Pediatricians tend to have resources, but in high school, the high school counselors. But for where I am, I usually work with my resource coordinator directly, and you know, pair that resource coordinator up with the parent. The parent can tell the coordinator the needs that they have, and she can find resources for them.
Yeah. So I think the point is just don't give up. If you feel like your child needs to talk to somebody, don't take that lightly. Work with, you know, start with somebody and let it lead from there and get referred to a couple different places, but find somebody where your children can build some rapport and talk to somebody, because there's kids committing suicide nowadays. There's a lot of anguish going on within children that they may not be verbalizing or vocalizing, um, but it's important to do that. And even the African American community, like this is a very new thing
Mhm.
for Black people to say, yeah, I have a counselor, or I'm taking my kids to see a counselor, or we're going together. I'm going individual counseling. Like this is kind of like uncharted territory for a lot of Black people. We need to take the shame off of that, or the stigma, or whatever people think about going to a counselor, whatever they think that means. My kids both go to see their school counselors. I've gone to counseling before. Um, I even think that there's a benefit to going to counseling when you don't think you have an issue, or when you
Mhm.
don't think anything is wrong. Go to talk to somebody who's professional. They can probably pull something out of you that you didn't think was there, or maybe you do struggle with something and you just really hadn't thought about it that way, or you act a certain way, and you didn't know where it was coming from. So I think this is a very healthy thing for families, specifically Black families, but everybody to explore, because there's just so many stressors in life nowadays, just all around. And you know, the thing that you need to protect is your peace nowadays
Mhm.
over everything. We have a comment from Aaliyah. As a parent, follow through with communication and paperwork for these agencies. Yes, that's a good point. So if
Mhm.
you already know you're at a
Definitely.
deficit, or you're facing some sort of wall because there's waiting lists and all these things, you have to have that resolve to say, okay, it might take me a couple of phone calls, it might take me some follow-up emails, but I'm going to persist and I'm going to pursue this, for the benefit of my children. So that's definitely important. Any final questions for our guests? This has been very informative. I feel like anybody who's watching live or who's going to watch the replay is going to have a lot of tools in their belt to really, get a second wind, get a breath of fresh air, and say, all right, I can do this
Mhm.
for my children. I'm going to do this for myself. I want to say on behalf of all of us, we appreciate you, Shadan, and everything you do for our children. Some of
Thank
our children specifically on the line, Adelia, but our children that you encounter in school. And educators don't get enough credit and praise. And we just want to say thank you so much for everything you do for our children. Any final thoughts, Shadan?
No, I want to say thank you for having me on. And there are some educators that are actually in the chat making comments, so I appreciate those educators as well. Um, Thank you for having me on. I really enjoyed this.
Yes, we really appreciate you. One request of everybody who is listening, either now or on the replay, please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. So we're gonna put the link up on the screen soon and in the chat. And Amar says hi, Miss Shadan.
Hi.
So please go subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. This series is going to continue. We have a different topic every episode. Little teaser: the next episode, we're going to be talking to an educator, specifically a principal, and we're going to see what her perspective is on the beginning of the next school year, because we're going to have that show in August. So stay tuned for that. But thank you all for joining and have a great week.
Thank you.
Okay, hang on, Shadan.
Okay.